Okay, how's everyone today? It's cold out there. Lovely spring. Announcement. Exam number 3, Thursday. Be ready for it. Covers everything since the last exam, which means it covers stage combat and the comedy lecture. Okay? It'd be 25 questions, either true, false, or short answer of some kind. I don't know what, I doubt this one won't be all true, false. I'll tell you that one up front. Okay? I haven't made it yet, though, so I don't know. Remember to bring your number 2 pencil and your Scantron sheet. Don't forget that. Any questions about that before we get into this lecture? All right, groovy. We're talking about comedy. And, oh, you had a question which I need to talk to everybody. Coming up also is the play Blithe Spirit, which you guys have to see. Remember, it's April the 4th through the 6th at 7:30. Is that right? Yeah. Excuse me, April 11th. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Thursday, Friday, Saturday at 7:30, Sunday at 2. And if you want to get some extra credit, remember you can usher. But you better do it soon. I hear the slots are filling up. It's not this coming weekend. It's
Is it the 11th?
yeah, the 11th, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I don't have my calendar in front of me. Yeah. Thursday, Friday, Saturday at 7:30, Sunday at 2 in the Bud Frank Theater, which is in the Gilbreth building. I was getting there. It's in your syllabus, but if you will contact Kim Eaton is the secretary for the Division of Theater, and she sets up all the ushers for that. You can call the Division of Theater, which that number is in the syllabus, or you can email Kim Eaton at theater, THEATRE, at etsu.edu. And she will, if she has a slot available, she'll put you down. It's not a hard job, but I will give you extra credit for doing it.
Do we have to get tickets, or do we just show up?
Good question. I would make sure that I at least make reservations, which is either by email or to call, to make sure you have tickets. A lot of, this play is pretty popular. I hear there's a lot of English classes that are required to see it, as well as a lot of our theater classes. The theater only holds about 250 people, and it's real easy to sell out. And you don't want to show up and then not be able to get in. If you do make reservations, get there early to pick up your tickets, because at 5 minutes until showtime, if you have not picked up your tickets, they'll give them away.
And who do we call and or email?
Kim Eaton. It's the same person that you would get in touch with if you were interested in ushering. How long is the play? With intermission, probably about 2 hours and 20 minutes. Each act is running about an hour long. It's funny. I think you'll enjoy it. It's going to be very funny. At least the rehearsals are fun. I'm laughing at the rehearsals. So.
Are you directing it?
I'm directing it, yeah.
At what time?
The play is at 7:30 on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and at 2 on Sunday. And don't be late. You won't get in. Okay? All right. You don't have to collect any programs or anything like that. Just see the play. And I'm going to ask you questions about the play on the test. So I'll know if you'd been there or not. And there'll be very obvious questions. Things about the scenery, things about costumes, things about what happened during the play. And this one's got a lot of special effects in it, so I have some good questions I can ask you. especially at the end of the play when the ghosts go crazy and start tearing the house up. So, yeah.
What do we call for the extra credit?
Man, it's in your syllabus, but it's Kim Eaton. It's a division of theater. I would tell you the number, but I don't know what it is. In my head, I have to look it up. Any other questions?
You said it was at 7:30?
Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 7:30. Sunday at 2. Don't be late. In the Bud Frank Theater, which is the first floor of the Gilbreth Building. Okay. Go see the play, have fun. You know, bring a date. Make it an evening. Have a good time. All righty. Now, if we're ready, we'll talk about comedy. Comedy. Now that's funny. We're going up through the continuum of comedy, and we're going up the levels. We started at the lowest level of farce, which was obscenity. We've talked about obscenity and physical mishap, which is also called slapstick comedy. Today, we're going to begin by talking about plot device. And plot device is sometimes called mistaken identity. Plot device or mistaken identity. Plot device we see in a lot of plays, especially the comedies of Shakespeare. In the comedies of Shakespeare, he tends to do this a lot. And what it is the audience is aware of who a character is. The other characters in the play are not. And usually because they're wearing a disguise of some kind. And that's where the humor comes from. For example, in Shakespeare's play As You Like It, which I think is a pretty funny play. In As You Like It, you have a girl who's cousins to the Duke. There's an evil Duke, and his daughter and this other girl are cousins, and they really like each other a lot. And the play begins, and there's a wrestling match, and this young guy shows up who's real handsome, and the one girl goes crazy over him, and she wants to meet him. She wants to know who he is. She just thinks he's like the most handsome man she's ever seen in her life. And they talk briefly, and she gets all excited, and she discovers he's going to enter the wrestling match. And he's going to fight Charles the wrestler. His name's Orlando. And what happens is she gets really worried about him because Charles the wrestler is like 3 times this guy's size, and she's afraid he's going to kill the guy in the fight. And Charles the wrestler works for the Duke, her uncle, who's evil, but she hasn't discovered yet that he's evil. And the guy comes out, says, I want to wrestle Charles the wrestler. That's what they do. They put up a prize. Who wants to go against Charles the wrestler? Charles comes out, makes fun of this little guy who's a lot smaller than him. They wrestle, and by a mistake, luckily, he wins. He beats Charles the wrestler at the last second. And the girl's all happy, and the Duke comes out and says, My, no one's ever beaten Charles the wrestler. Who is this young man? And he goes, I'm Orlando. And he goes, You're not the Orlando, son of my enemy. Yeah. So he kicks the kid out of the kingdom. Says, Get out of my land. or I'll kill you. I hated your father, I hate you. And Orlando leaves. Well, the girl goes crazy. She just met this guy and she really likes him. So she decides, because she's learned her uncle has had some shady dealings, that she is going to go out into the woods and find the guy. But in that day and time, it's hard for a woman to travel across country alone. Something may happen to her. Someone may take advantage of her. So what does she do? Anybody? She dresses as a man. A very pretty man. And her cousin, the Duke's daughter, says, well, I don't want you to go alone. We'll go together. But I'm not wearing men's clothes. I'm going to dress as a woman. And they leave. They escape. They go off in the woods. Meanwhile, they're in the woods. They come upon these trees that are covered with signs. And her name is carved all over the signs, all over the trees. Orlando's in love with her, and he's carving her name on the trees because he's in love. And she's like, oh, this is kind of cool. But she's dressed as a guy. And she meets him. And she runs up on him. And it's more complicated. I'm not going to go through the whole play. But she actually meets another guy first, or another woman first, who thinks she's a pretty guy, who falls in love with her and starts following her around. And she's like freaking out because this woman's chasing her around thinking she's a guy. And then she meets Orlando, and Orlando says, you know, I have a girl that I'm deeply in love with back lives in this place I can't go anymore, and I just don't know how to talk to girls, and I don't know what to do. And she says, well, practice on me. I'll teach you how to kiss a girl. Now, the audience is in on the joke. We know she's a girl with a little mustache on. It's kind of like Clark Kent. You know, he takes the glasses off and he's Superman. We have no idea when he puts the glasses on that that's the same person. She has a little mustache on, and he's going, wow, that's a dude. Doesn't look anything like the girl I'm in love. But that's what they do. They go through the whole thing. Mistaken identity. And all the comedy is they get caught in a situation, a plot device. In other words, all the comedy comes out of the story. It's part of the plot. Now, I'm going to show you an example from a movie. And this movie is called Some Like It Hot. And Some Like It Hot is considered by the American Film Institute as being one of the top movies, one of the funniest movies ever made. It stars Jack Lemmon, Tony Curtis, and Marilyn Monroe. Now, I'm going to set up the story, and I'm going to show you two scenes. The first scene, Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis are jazz musicians. This is during the Roaring '20s. And they're looking for work. They're out of work. And they discover from their agent that the only job that they can get is a one-night gig playing at a birthday party. But if they were girls, the word that's used in the movie, you could join an all-girl band that's going to Florida and is going to play down there for 3 to 6 months. And it's the same instruments that you guys play. And they go, too bad. Gee, well, we're going to go to the birthday party. We need to go borrow a car because it's out of town. So they go down to this garage. It's in Chicago. They go down to a garage and they walk in on the St. Valentine's Day massacre, where two gangs are at war and they're killing all these gangsters. And they witness it. And the gang sees them. And immediately the gangsters are out to kill them. And that leads to our first scene. So we'll set up and we'll do this first scene for you. They get on the train and they have a rehearsal in the band, and then Marilyn Monroe's character, who's the singer in the band, and she plays ukulele, drops a liquor bottle. And they're not allowed to have liquor in the band, and the band leader's about ready to fire her, and Tony Curtis, now Josephine, or Daphne, changes his name, says, hey, I didn't know, I had that for cough syrup, but now that I know, I won't have it anymore. I won't have any liquor. And they say, okay. So he saves her job. So she comes to thank her, she thinks it's a woman, that night while they're going to bed. And that's this next scene. Marilyn Monroe thinks that he is a girl. It gets worse. They travel down to Florida on this train. He's in love with Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe thinks he's a girl, doesn't know who he is. He can't talk to her about that. And then the other guy, Tony Curtis, falls in love with Marilyn Monroe, but he gets a plan. He starts talking to her as a girl and discovers she likes guys who wear glasses but have lots of money. And especially if they like to have boats and stuff. So he gets a costume and a little captain's hat, and he has an ascot, and he starts to pretend that he's this rich guy when they get to Florida. And he says, oh yeah, that yacht out there is mine. And she's like, oh my, you know, and they start having a relationship. And then every time they have to go back to the band, he has to run back and dress as a woman again so he can play in the band, and then run back out and dress, and he keeps running around trying not to get caught by her. Meanwhile, the gangsters show up, and they're looking for them. And so they've got to be careful that the gangsters don't kill them, and they're hiding and in disguises. And then there's this old guy who falls in love with Jack Lemmon's character. And he starts giving him gifts and stuff. Diamonds and all kinds of stuff. And he's like, oh my God, what am oh, this is nice. And they go through the whole movie. Finally, at the end, they do get rid of the gangsters. Tony Curtis reveals that he's not a millionaire. She still loves him anyway. And Jack Lemmon turns to the old rich guy, and I mean, this guy's like 100 years old, and turns to him and goes, you know, I'm a man. And the guy goes, well, nobody's perfect. And that's how it ends. It's all mistaken identity, the whole story, and it's all in the plot. If you were to see some of these scenes and not know what happened before, they're not funny. And that's how mistaken identity works. That's why it's plot device. All the comedy comes out of the story. This gets done a lot. There's a lot of sitcoms that have been done with this. In fact, Tom Hanks started his career on television playing a role like that. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? It was a TV show in the 1970s called Bosom Buddies. And it was about two young men who had nowhere to live, and they take a room in an all-women's hotel in New York. And they have to dress like women every time they go to their room, up to their hotel. And then they get all confused because they start falling in love with different people. There was another comedy in the 70s called Three's Company. And the guy pretends to be gay, though he's not. And it's very, very funny, the situations that they get caught in. Okay? And that's what the idea is behind all of this. Any questions about that? Okay. The next level of comedy is verbal wit. Verbal wit relies on language to be funny. Whether it's jokes, whatever it might be. I like verbal wit. And one of my favorite forms of verbal wit is a thing called a malapropism. Malapropism. M-A-L-A-P-R-O-P-I-S-M. Malapropism. This comes from a play called The Rivals. The Rivals was written in the 18th century. And there's a character in The Rivals called Mrs. Malaprop. And when you do a malapropism, or a malaprop, it's using words for something other than what they mean. Using words for something other than what they mean. For example, in the play The Rivals, Mrs. Malaprop is an aunt, and her niece is in love with a young captain in the army. And Mrs. Malaprop likes the captain too, though she's a lot older. And she tries to make herself sound like she's smarter than she really is. I mean, and so she uses big words, and she has no idea what they mean. She thinks she knows what they mean. And at one point, she says to him, "Oh, Captain, I understand you went to Egypt. Did you see any allegories on the Nile?" Does anyone get that one? Allegory on the Nile. She says allegory instead of alligator. She does this all the way through. At one point she says, my niece is illegible for marriage, instead of ineligible. She's illegible. And she does this all the time. This is one of the first characters who ever did this. And so they tied the name of the character, malaprop, when you use a word that doesn't mean what it's supposed to. Another one of my favorite things when it comes to verbal wit are puns. You guys like puns? What's a pun? Play on words, yeah. You know, I want to start a bakery, but first I need a lot of dough. Play on words. Okay. I'm going to show you a couple clips. And one is from the Marx Brothers, and the other is our buddies Abbott and Costello. And these are good examples of verbal wit. What's the first one on here? I don't know. Animal crackers. Oh, good. All right. In this one, Groucho Marx plays a character called Captain Spaulding. And he's going to woo this rich lady. He's going to try to marry her for her money, or get money from her. He doesn't really want to marry her. He doesn't love her. And in this scene, he starts to talk to her, and he gets crazy. He goes all over the place when he talks with her. And he's going to use a lot of malapropisms, and I want you to look out for them. The lady that plays in this, I don't know if you guys watch a lot of Marx Brothers movies. I love them. The lady who plays in this, her name, her name is Margaret Dumas. And Margaret Dumas is very funny in terms of acting history, because when she got cast in the Marx Brothers movie, she was a serious actress. And she never knew she was doing comedy. And they wouldn't tell her, because they wanted her to play it seriously. And so when she acts with them, a lot of the time she had no idea what Groucho was doing to her. And she acted on Broadway with them, and she acted in a lot of their films. They just kept using her over and over and over again and let her just kind of play it seriously, and then they do comic stuff around her. So Captain Spaulding is hitting on this old lady. They're also going to make fun in here, just briefly, of a play that was very popular and was on Broadway at the time called Strange Interlude that Eugene O'Neill wrote. And in Strange Interlude, they do funny monologues in the show. Actors step out of the play and talk to the audience. And Groucho's going to make fun of that in this. So here's Groucho Marx. Malapropism? Pick up on one?
Fascinated right here in the arm.
Yeah. Why, Captain, you're fascinated. Yes, I was fascinated right here. Fascinated is for vaccinated. Yeah. Yeah. He plays on words a lot. He continues on in this, making fun of them. He keeps doing other things. It's the whole thing is language, and almost all the Marx Brothers movies relies on verbal wit for you to get it. Now, here's another little scene I want you to see. This is a short one. It's from an Abbott and Costello film. And do I have any math majors in here? You'll get this. None of the rest of us will. Okay? No, we will. They're gonna do some special math, and it's all verbal wit. So let's take a look at that. Yay! I heard laughs on that one. Good. Abbott and Costello are crazy. They got a lot of fun routines like that. Good math? Yeah, you can pull that on your professor? You do a whole thesis, write about it. Math according to Abbott and Costello. Okay. Any questions about verbal wit? You're used to verbal wit because you hear it a lot. But remember I said that as you go up the level, as you go up the comedy continuum, you have to think more. Don't have to think at all. Have to think a little bit more, not much. Now I got to know the story for it to be funny. Now I have to listen to the words. If I don't know the language, I don't know the words, it's not funny. Okay? These are the levels of low comedy or farce. Now let's go to high comedy. Inconsistency of character. In inconsistency of character, the character is supposed to act one way. We expect them to act a certain way, but they do not. They act differently than they are supposed to. And that's what makes it funny.
Sorry.
Inconsistency of character. He's never left before. Did you chase him out of here?
Yeah, he's gonna go to the
Okay. All right. A character is supposed to act one way, and they do not. They act a different way. There's a lot of comic films that play on this, some plays. Any of you fans of Monty Python? They do this in Monty Python all the time. They'll set you up. You'll think a person's a business person or someone in the government, and then all of a sudden they're doing really weird stuff. A guy wants to buy cheese at a cheese shop where they have no cheese. And then he turns around and shoots the guy at the end because he doesn't have cheese. We're not expecting that to happen. That shouldn't happen, but it does. The whole movie of the Holy Grail. All the characters are supposed to act a certain way. King Arthur, whoever they might be, and they do not. There's one film group that has made a couple different movies using a lot of the same people, and this is all their comedy. How many of you seen the Airplane movies? Yeah. Few of you? Only 2 or 3? Yeah, come on. You've seen the Airplane movies. The whole idea of the Airplane movies was they took the traditional Hollywood movie where a plane is flying somewhere and it gets into trouble and it's going to crash. And then they spend the whole movie trying to get the plane to land safely. That's the idea behind the Airplane movie. It's a parody of those movies where an airplane is in trouble. Also, they've done them with ships. Remember, there's going to be a morning after. What? Do you know what movie I'm talking about? The ship that turns over and everybody has to get out of the ship to survive. They're making fun of these survival movies. And in the Airplane movies, what you have are people on the plane and people at the airport who we know. We know these jobs. We know what a pilot should act like. We know what the stewardess should act like. We know what the ground crew should act like. And what they do in the movie is none of them do what they're supposed to do. So let me show you one quick example of this. We can go on down to the next thing. And I want to do River of Jordan. In this, and this scene has been in countless movies, there's a little sick boy on the plane. He's got a terrible disease. And the stewardess notices that he's sick. And she decides to go cheer him up and sing a song to him. And here's what happens. What do you think? Funny? See what they're making fun of? You'll see in movies, you'll see scenes like that all the time. A woman's trying to cheer up the little kid and then she about kills him. And nobody pays any attention. That's inconsistency of character. They've done these in some other movies too. Police Squad, if you've seen those movies. And also the Police Academy movies. They do that, where they have these characters that are just crazy and shouldn't be there. Mel Brooks does it in a lot of his movies too, where he'll have characters just stick them in the show and they don't act any way that you're supposed to if you actually had that job or were doing that thing. Does it make sense? Why would this be an upper level of comedy, do you think?
Because you have to know how they're supposed to act.
Yeah, if you don't know the job or the culture or how the people act or supposed to act, the history with like Monty Python, then it's not funny at all. You don't get it. You won't understand it. You have to have information. Did you notice the jet on here when it was flying? Did it sound like a jet? No, it's an old-timey airplane. Every time they show the jet in that, you hear like it's a World War II airplane going. And if you're not paying attention, you're just kind of... The first time I watched the movie, I didn't get that at all. I watched the whole movie, and finally when it was over, a friend of mine was just laughing about that it was an airplane. I was like, oh, God, yeah. And it's inconsistent. It's not supposed to be that way. Okay. If there are no questions, I'm going to jump ahead. The second highest level of the comedy, of a high comedy, is called the comedy of ideas. The comedy of ideas. I-D-E-A-S. Ideas. In the comedy of ideas, what the playwright is doing is the playwright has his or her own moral or social viewpoint. about something. And they're demonstrating that through the humor in the story. So they have their own moral or social viewpoint, and they're demonstrating that in the story. Sometimes they'll debate intellectual propositions. So in the story, they work in debate about philosophy. And sometimes it's just to further their own viewpoint, whatever that might be. There was a British playwright at the beginning of the 20th century named Shaw who did this. He wrote a lot of comedies of ideas. One of the people who does it now and does it pretty well in a number of his movies is Woody Allen. And I'm going to show you an example from a Woody Allen movie called Love and Death. Have any of you ever seen Love and Death? Oh, this will be fresh. Love and Death is a fairly early Woody Allen movie. And in it, he's trying to do several things. One, he's making fun of Russian novels. So the story takes place in Russia. And it takes place as Napoleon's army is invading Russia. Woody Allen's character is a son of a landowner. He's the youngest of three brothers. And he's very much in love with a young woman who you'll see in the story. And the problem is he likes her, she likes him as a friend, but not as a lover. Now that will change throughout as the movie goes on. Woody Allen, in a lot of his writing, deals with this question: what happens when we die? And I don't know if you've ever read any of his short stories, but he's written some very funny short stories who deal with this very problem. What happens when we die? Do we go to hell? Do we go to heaven? Does the body just waste away? What happens? And in this movie, Love and Death, he looks at two things. What is true love? And what happens when we die? And somehow he puts them together. So Woody Allen's character, we're going to look at the very beginning of the movie. He's going to set this up for us, and we're going to get an idea of his views of life, love, and death. Okay? And it all takes place on a Russian, as though it were taking place in a Russian novel. He goes down, he gets involved in the army, and he gets caught as a spy, and that's when it goes back to the beginning. They're going to hang him for being a spy. Napoleon's army is going to hang him. All the way through, questions about life, mortality, living, death, and they work it into the storyline. They work it into the comedy. Now, if you've not had philosophy or don't know anything about philosophy or about religion, you won't get any of this. Or you'll just get pieces of it. The more you know, the funnier this movie becomes. The more you've studied. Comedy of ideas. Woody Allen has many great ideas, many thoughts about philosophy and about life, and he questions those a lot in a lot of his movies. And almost all of his movies, in some way or another, become comedies of ideas. Any thoughts or questions about that? Okay. The highest level of comedy is satire. Hello. Satire. Highest level of comedy, satire. In satire, we use wit, irony, and exaggeration to attack and expose evil. We use wit, irony, and exaggeration to attack and expose evil. The hope is by seeing the story, by seeing this comedy, it will help change society for the better. I'll say it all again. We use wit, irony, and exaggeration. That does sound like a test question, doesn't it? To attack and expose evil. We try to change society for the better. There are different kinds of satire. There's political satire, where we make fun of government. There's social satire, where we look at individuals and their lives and just people in general. Satire is very popular. How many of you watch Saturday Night Live? Satire. How many of you like Stephen Colbert? Satire. The Daily Show. Satire. Colbert is one of my favorites, and I like him because he pretends to be so right-wing conservative that some people actually believe he is. Some people don't get the humor. My wife's father was just going off one day about this guy that, he rated right up there with Rush Limbaugh as one of his heroes. He just thought he had it right. And I went, who are you talking about? He was talking about Stephen Colbert. And I was like, ooh, did not get the humor in that. Okay, and that can happen with satire. People will do satire, and some people get really think they mean this. No, it's fake. They're trying to overplay it. They're making it bigger than life. They're making it so unbelievable that you won't believe it. And yet people will. They do. Okay? But in the playwright's mind, they're attacking and exposing evil. Now, I'm going to show you a scene from one of the greatest satire films ever made. And it's called The Great Dictator. And it stars Charlie Chaplin. Charlie Chaplin made this movie in 1940. And what he wanted to do with The Great Dictator is he wanted to show the world how messed up Adolf Hitler and Mussolini, the Italian dictator, were. He wanted to show the evils of fascism. So he makes this movie, and in it he plays a character who looks an awful lot and talks an awful lot like Adolf Hitler. Also, he hired actors who look, there's an actor in here who looks exactly like Benito Mussolini. And here's the power of satire. This movie was so good, when it came out, the German government complained to the United States, protested. How dare they make fun of our leader, Adolf Hitler? And there was a movement in the United States not to allow the movie to be shown. And there were a lot of cities in the United States, a lot of movie theaters, who refused to show it. A year later, we are in World War II. 3 years later, we discover all kinds of horrors that went on in Nazi Germany. In this scene, we're going to show you this scene right here. This is when Napoleone, who is supposed to be Mussolini, comes into the office of Hitler, and they're dictator buddies. They're gonna have a little meeting, and Hitler's general is set up this psychological thing where he's going to make Hitler make himself look better than Mussolini, but you'll see it will backfire on it. Okay, let's watch this. Pick up on the fact that they're trying to show you something about the dictators and their relationship and where the world's going. Okay, this will be on the test. See you Thursday.